Hi, I'm Aaron Robbins with Intrinsic First, and thanks for listening to the Intrinsic Leadership podcast. Make sure to stick around to the end and hear some pretty bad jokes. And don't forget to like or subscribe, and we're here to help. So we'd love to hear from you. Leave comments or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. Enjoy the show. Tuning in. We are continuing our now 3-series podcast on the introductions for this podcast, talking about our backgrounds and what we are hoping you'll get out of this and the intent of our podcast. We've talked about Drea, we've talked about Jimmy, so it's my turn to talk about my background. So I'll just jump right into it. Well, I think we've all kind of begun in the beginning of our career to college time. High school. I don't know if you're aware of how many jobs I had during high school and college, but I dabbled around. If you name it, I probably did it. Anything from being a lifeguard to working at a driving range and getting hit by golf balls in a caged car.
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah, right?
Get hit in the head 2 times.
I remember getting stuck in the mud. It was a brand new driving range and it was still sod, and like, don't go in this area. Like, of course I went in that area. Why not? Oh, I get it now. It's like a foot thick of mud and I can't get out because people are going to hit me in the face.
You know, you told me when I first talked to you, you play golf. You said to me, well, it takes a lot of balls to play golf the way I do.
Oh, man. I'm going to have to turn up the sound effects. That's right, I did say that. So anyways, when I was finishing up high school, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. And I remember going to the guidance counselor and sitting down and saying, what am I supposed to do? And going to college, I didn't want to have to do applications. I was a lazy high school kid. And the guidance counselor said, well, what are you good at? Do you like math? I said, yeah, I like math. I'm good at math. They said, well, you should be an engineer.
That's the way you got it.
That was kind of it. Okay. And so I did. I went to school. I applied to a couple of schools. I ended up going to University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
That's not the same as University of Kansas, is it?
Yeah. University of Kansas. Yeah, KU.
There's two. There's
K-State.
Yeah, K-State.
The Wildcats. And then there's the better school, University of Kansas.
Okay.
My professors convinced me to stay for a master's, and I did a bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering. I did a bunch of on-campus interviews, ultimately ended up moving out here to San Diego, and the best job offer I had was to come work in the government as a federal employee for SPAWAR System Center Pacific. So I was never in the military like both of you, but since I began my working career, I've been working with and around the military, first as a federal employee and then as a contractor. So I did the design work for a while and fell into process improvement, which was very aligned at the time. Lean Six Sigma was blowing up in the government, and I volunteered for a class. I'm pretty sure I was the only government employee in the class that volunteered for the course. But I enjoyed it, and I ended up getting into all these process improvement initiatives and learning Six Sigma, CMMI, and a lot of those methodologies and program management just in general. And that led me into program management roles. I just really enjoyed the leadership work, doing the management stuff. I love spreadsheets. I'm a big spreadsheet nerd, and just working with people and helping them, get better. And so I moved my way around into different leadership roles, got recruited out to a contractor company. I left the government, and I managed a couple different larger contracts supporting back to the government, the same command that I worked for as a government employee, and ended up getting promoted into organizational leadership.
I
was a regional director for CSA, and that's when we met Jimmy. We would go out and recruit at NavNet and other places, and we met Jimmy and thought he seemed all right.
All right. I made the cut.
So he made the cut, so we brought him on. He was a supply corps guy. We brought him into a contracts role, but quickly realized his skill set. And although we didn't put him in the regional director position that he applied for, politics and whatnot, he took a pretty big leadership role in the latter time at CSA, leading the scheduling team. And speaking of all of this podcast related, our intentions here, I think that alone is such a good example, proving that you don't have to be an expert in an area to be a good leader of people, right? Because Jimmy didn't really know scheduling. And of course, who knows, maybe some of the schedulers would argue that maybe. But he came in and led our scheduling team, and he knew leadership. He didn't know scheduling. But that's what mattered, and that team thrived. They did really well.
I think that's what the military did really good for me. Like, we're really used to, like, as an officer, going every 2 or 3 years, you get pulled away from your unit and you get plopped right down. You're always parachuting into a different organization, and so what you learn is, just how to observe what's going on and how to make the pieces work more efficiently. They could be people or processes. Right. So I think that's where my skill set was really developed in the military. Right. Even leading the economics department at the Naval Academy, I was not an economist, but I had military professors and PhDs to manage, and so you quickly learn the context that you're in, and so you can properly manage them and lead them.
Well, I think that's one of the key interesting problems that happen in organizations around the country, is that a manager gets in charge of or gets assigned to manage people who they can't do the job that they're managing, that they're asking the direct report to do. Right. And you better understand that kind of a circumstance is very different than if you've done the job you're asking the other person to do. Right. You're in a different position.
That's true, and I think there's pros and cons to that, right?
Yes.
There's advantage to having been an expert, right? There were things that you weren't able to necessarily have discussions about and provide some of that technical mentorship. Right. To the personnel, but it also meant that you weren't necessarily tempted to get in and try to do it for them if they were, more in a use situational or SL2 terminology, a D3 or D4. You didn't need to worry about trying to get in and do their job because you weren't going to be able to do it anyways, and you could focus on providing that support.
So understanding yourself
leadership
was super important. So I knew what my limitations were, and so if I didn't have the technical skill set, I knew how to find somebody that did, or what.
Well, that becomes your role.
Right.
Is the provider of resources to the person who's trying to learn how to do the job, right. And while you can't do it, you better make sure that the person you're finding or people you're finding for resources to get that person up to skill are good.
Right.
You really, it's very, very different.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap things up, as I was working at CSA and the CEO switched over, Dave Hickey, who's still a good friend of mine, needed to change around HR and talent development. He wanted to work on that area. And long story short, I ended up in that position. And that was like a massive turning point in my career. I went from engineer who, moved into leadership and operations, and I was now literally running, human resources activities within the company. At first, it was just talent development and like organizational development, moved into HR. Dave had everybody in the leadership team read a book called Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, which we'll reference down below in the comments. You can read it. I highly recommend it. It's a good book. But that kind of kicked off me reading all these leadership books, and I just started just digging into it. And I went and took a SL2 course, and I learned SL2. In fact, Judes was one of my instructors at that class, who I now work with at Mojo. Crazy how the world kind of keeps coming back around.
Yeah.
And I started to learn why some of the things I did or didn't do either worked or didn't work. And there was just these constant aha moments, and I just fell in love with the psychology. And so as part of the HR role, I went and got a SHRM SCP certification so that I could talk the talk and learn that. And I went and ultimately went back and got the master's in IO psychology. After finishing that, I enrolled, and now I'm working on my PhD in organizational behavior at CGU.
How many masters do you have?
Too many. So, I had somebody one time tell me that I'm certifiable. I'm over certified. So, I have my master's in mechanical engineering. I have my master's in IO psych. I didn't know that I was going to get another master's in organizational behavior as part of the PhD program, but and soon I'll have that one too, which I don't need. It's not about the degrees, though.
No, it's not.
I just like to learn.
It does give people who don't know you a sense of your capacity to take in information.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary.
But I've always had that drive to learn. That's one of the things that motivates me the most. And since I did the Lean Six Sigma. I got my green belt certification, then I went and got the black belt certification, and then I went and got the Six Sigma black belt certification with ASQ, and then I just, kept going from there. It became an addiction. I got Scrum Master certified. I went and got Risk Management Professional certified, Project Management Professional certified. That one, not a huge fan of the test and everything, but that one's been a big one, especially in the defense industry where it's a highly regarded, or maybe not highly regarded, but highly used, highly required certification for contractors. But yeah, so I've done a lot of certifications, but it's all been really just because I love to learn this stuff. In any case, I just dove right into the HR stuff at CSA and kept reading books, and that's where we got introduced. So after that SL2 class, I was super into it. I wanted to roll it out with the company, and so they introduced me to one of the channel partners, and it was Jason Arnold. Uh-huh. And Jason said, I got to introduce you to this guy, Chris, because I think there's something that you'd be interested in. So I met Chris Wallerman, and we did a few demos, and you were in one of the meetings. That's where I met you, was one of the conference rooms over at Innova, where we were talking about Inspire. And we ended up being one of the first companies to roll out Inspire outside of Innova. In fact, we might have been the first one outside of Innova other than Blanchard. And I loved it. You came and taught one of the intro to leadership courses to help us when we were rolling out Inspire, and that's where I got the book, and that's when I showed it to Jimmy. We only worked kind of professionally then a little bit. You were doing courses with Innova, and I was working with them. I ultimately ended up moving over to KES, where they asked me to come take over the NEF because there were some challenges there.
And what is the NEF, just so our audience knows?
The NEF is the Network Integration and Engineering Facility.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah. If you can't know your acronyms in the government, you're not going to last.
That's right.
The NEF, where I kind of grew up in my leadership role, one of my first leadership roles, they asked me to come back as a contractor and kind of fix some problems that they were having over in the NEF. And it was a blast, but I've kind of turned into this fixer of organizations as we've gone through, and that's what we did. And we implemented, we've talked about writing a study on that as an intervention study of all the different things that we did. And so a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in this podcast are the things that I've implemented in that organization. And we ended up taking the CPARS, another acronym, the Contract Performance Assessment Report, which is essentially a grade card that the government gives you on a contract performance each year. We took that from, let's just say, very low to very high.
Phenomenal. I've seen the results.
Right. And so without getting into proprietary details about those ratings, that was one of our main measures for success. And the other main measure for success, which is really, I think, how we got reintroduced and started working together in detail. And I remember that story, too, because I ran the survey for I came over in September of 2019. And in October, November, I wanted some type of culture survey or assessment for the employees to kind of measure how we're doing on the interpersonal side and the leadership side of things. And so we had done the employee work passion survey at CSA. So I built it back up in SurveyMonkey, and I threw it out to all the employees to try to get an understanding of where we were. And I wanted to keep doing it. But I wanted to kind of work with you. So I remember I called you up. I don't know if you remember this. And I said, hey, Drea, I've already done this survey once, but I'm wondering if I can keep doing it. And you said, Aaron, well, let me just first say that before you use someone else's IP, you should really ask them first. He said, but you've got I know you have the best of intentions and all this, so I'm more than happy to support you. And that's when we started meeting on a more regular basis. And of course, that now is turning into a paper that we're going to write, where we've actually shown over a longitudinal study, we've shown statistically significant causality between employee cognitions, which is how an employee views and thinks about their work environment, and their associated intentions for how they're going to behave or what they're going to do. Are they going to stay with the organization? Are they going to go above and beyond? So that's huge. That's going to be a huge, I think, study once we get it published for helping organizations understand what levers they have and which levers they should be, working on to try to improve their culture, to improve employee experience and well-being and employee work passion, right? Yeah. Which we'll have a whole session to talk about employee work passion.
When the time comes, if people are enjoying these podcasts, I think it'll be fun for them to see the data, look at it and say, oh, that's how we can begin to modify the work environment, and so that it's in favor of changing people and causing people to be thriving and passionate about what they do. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. And
getting better at it.
Yeah. And of course, while I was at KES, and I brought Jimmy over to help lead the NEF, and he took over the engineering group, yet another group, which he wasn't necessarily an expert. He was a new submarine guy.
I remember that conversation was great. It was, because we were going to lunch during that time, and you're kind of expressing some of your challenges in that role at the NEF.
There's only a couple.
It's just a couple.
Yeah.
But one of them was one of the engineering managers you hired just up and left like one day, which is out of there.
About a week, yeah. He lasted about a week. He's like, nah, this ain't working for me. I'm out.
So then he asked if I could come over, and I was like, I'm not an engineer. And Aaron's comment was like, I don't need another engineer. I just need someone who can lead.
I had the engineers. Paul, he had the expertise.
Paul was fantastic.
So he didn't want to lead. He wanted to do the technical stuff, so it ended up being a perfect.
That was my first question was, do you have a technical expert that can help me run this organization? Sure enough, that was Paul Hom, and I loved working with him. So 2.5 years, working with Employee Work Passion Survey and leading that organization. There's roughly 50, employees in that department. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that a lot.
Yep. So while we were there, we bootstrapped Intrinsic first together, which Jimmy already kind of talked about. We ended up getting on a subcontract, so we have employees working over in the government. And now we're starting to work on this and focus on the leadership stuff. So for me, in terms of wrapping up my background, I'm working on my PhD now and leading and doing all the back office work for Intrinsic First to manage the company while Jimmy takes care of operations of the contract and supervising our employee team. And we're the Intrinsic First is the North American channel partner for Mojo Moment, selling all of the great products and learning journeys and learning experiences from Mojo Moments has on motivation. And we're going to, again, another podcast we'll have coming up pretty quick is talking about all the motivation stuff, which is a huge topic. And that's where I'm doing some of my PhD research, is looking at self-determination theory and basic psychological needs related to leadership skills, in this case, feedback. Right now, and that's one of the areas that I'm digging into.
Mm-hmm. So that all leads to, how do you think we can service the listener or the watcher of this product or the podcast?
Yeah. So
I was just say, I think we could service them right now with a good joke. Just to
with a good joke.
Just to
Trey, you got one ready to go.
I do. I have one loaded up. I can tell you. Do you know what they call a cow that suffers from a nervous tic?
I actually don't remember. I think you've told me this joke.
But no, they call it beef jerky.
You know what? We should. We can go with applause today.
Oh,
too much fun with the sound effects.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
That's all right. It's
Beef
okay.
jerky.
If I get people clapping,
we'll keep going. So I guess, to that end, though, we want this to be entertaining and fun. But I think some of the main purposes of this podcast is I hope people learn something, right? Mm-hmm. That we help educate them on leadership topics. And one of the things that, especially with motivation, you can take the classes and you can learn the theory, but until you really dialogue about it or hear people dialoguing about it and hear the examples and then be able to apply it in the work that you're actually doing and start to recognize it for yourself, that's when you really start to learn and understand and build the skills associated with some of this stuff. So, I see this as a way, a non-standard way of educating people to learn this stuff through our experiences and our discussions, and just kind of, help round out an understanding about leadership.
Well, just a word about that. Seems to me that the connection between what we'll be talking about and the ideas that we're going to be asking people to consider comes in through the ideas of trying them themselves. And so one of the things we've lost in the midst of all this COVID stuff is we've face-to-face transformation of information or the use of certain ideas. Right. Don't get the true massaging that's necessary so that somebody walks out of there going, oh, this is what I have to do. This is what I need to say and how I ought to get it up. So we're going to be focusing leadership on leadership because or through the practice of ideas, the actual behaviors that somebody should be doing or could be doing that they're not doing, or that they should do more of. Right. So if somebody listens to a podcast in the future, they should walk away with some very specific behaviors. Do this, say this, right. Use this idea. Yep. And so we try to get, I hope, these podcasts into what do we mean by leadership? Oh, what does it look like? Because leadership is a verb. It's not a noun. Yeah. And it's something that you do, not what you. It's not what you have.
Right. I think our approach also takes the psychological aspect of leadership, which stems from the name of the podcast, Intrinsic Leadership.
Yeah.
And I like what you had to say earlier about that. And that was really, really insightful to how we came up with this idea.
Yeah. It might be helpful for people to realize that the word intrinsic has meaning in that we're asking them to look at leadership as an inner skill, an actual understanding of self that gets manifested through the process of trying to lead someone else. And so it's learning how to raise children, for example, right. By trying some of those ideas, or by trying to lead small informal groups, being a coach for a civic organization. Right. Right. Those are the times when we want you to begin to apply what we're going to be saying.
Yep. I agree. Any other thoughts, Jimmy?
Yeah, we took a long time to come up with the idea for or the name of our company, and like we knew intrinsic had to be a part of the name. Everything starts from within.
Yes,
right? And that's kind of where that goes. Our mission as a company is to make the world a better place to work, and we truly believe it starts from within. So
that means that there's going to be times when you got to look at yourself, and you got to look at yourself in a way that says, wow, I've not been doing this as well as I could be.
And that is hard.
And that is very difficult. It's like the guy who walks out to the psychiatrist's office. He says, "Doc, you got to help me. My life is just shreds. I mean, people. It's I can't. And guys, just take it easy. You can't even talk. Relax. Just relax. Now, what's the problem? I'm telling you what the problem is. This is my brother. He thinks he's a chicken. He's driving me crazy. And the doctor says, well, that doesn't sound like much of a problem. Why don't we tell him he's not a chicken? Just cut to the chase and say you're not a chicken. Yeah. He says, I can't. I need the eggs. People are doing things because they need to do it, not because it's going to be functional.
Right.
It's going to, all you got to do is do this, And my response is, how do we help people catch themselves in the middle of thinking they're a chicken? They're not. We've got to get people to realize that the first person to change, if you want to create change, is you.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. You start inside. They say, if something goes wrong or doesn't go the way you want, as a good leader first is going to look in the mirror. Yes. And try to see what can I do? Be proactive. What can I do to address that? Doesn't mean that it's your fault. It's not about blaming yourself. No.
Well, that's an important distinction, because I'm not telling you it's your fault. Yeah. I'm just blaming you.
Good one.
No, that's a thing. What I know you got to want. Do you think that the audience might want us to have a direct communications with them, that be able to answer their questions, or be a consultant to them in some way?
Absolutely. So you'll see the link to our website. They can reach us that way, or we'll answer all the comments. We'll make sure we're engaging on the comments.
And as we're working on these podcasts, we're going to be building out training. We already offer consulting support. We offer some training. We have the Mojo Moments training on motivation, which is fantastic. I recommend it to any organization, whether it's an individual or a leader, to better understand. And that's starting to learn that inside of yourself and how you work from a psychological perspective, but from an application and a skill that you can apply. Yeah. And we're going to continue to build out trainings on these topics. So you can always reach out to that, but we're always available. I think we're pretty available.
You could probably produce customized interventions if they need
100%, yeah. That's what we do.
So we'd love to hear from anyone. If there's something that's bugging you or you need help or advice, reach out. Again, there's an email down below, and we'd be happy to provide you some support or guidance, advice.
Yeah, we can recommend some good reading.
The one and only Dr.
The one and only.
All right.
He's too humble, this one. So with that, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
All right.
Hey there, you made it to the end. Thanks for watching our episode. I hope you found some value in it. If you enjoyed it, hit like or subscribe and reach out to us. Leave us a comment, shoot us an email, let us know what you think. If you have ideas for other topics, we'd love to hear those. And you can email us at info@intrinsicfirst.com. Thanks.